Well, welcome everybody. Welcome to ConsciousCafe Global today. My name is Gina Lazenby and I shall be hosting this event with Sylvana Caloni. Welcome, Sylvana. You're on mute. Muted everybody. This is, I believe, our 9th global event that we've been having. I'm going to tell you a little bit about ConsciousCafe. ConsciousCafe was launched, started by Judy Piatkis, who's with us on the call today, 9 years ago in London. And she'd been a leading publisher, especially in the area of mind, body, spirit books. And after selling her publishing company, she wanted to create a space for conversation about things that mattered. And this is what she's done over the years. And they've all been live community meetings. A number of us have set up meetings in our regions. I think Cora's here, she set up a meeting in Salisbury. I have a ConsciousCafe meeting in Skipton, and we meet from Lancashire and Yorkshire. And these are places of connection where we can talk about things that matter, often with people who we don't know, but we become a community, perhaps in things that we can't talk about with our friends and family. We also have ConsciousCafes, New Forest, Newbury, mentioned Canterbury, with Cora, Oundle, St Albans. We also have France, 2 in Geneva, 1 in Singapore, and our latest one has opened in Rome, and we're opening one in Vancouver. So that's really exciting. So we have, I'll just tell you about the next global event that we have. We have one on the 6th of August with Jessica Adams, who is an internationally renowned astrologer. She's based in Hobart, Australia. And she's going to really be forecasting, talking about her reading of the next 20 years. It's going to be an absolutely fascinating astrology session. She does not do consultations herself, so this will be a lovely opportunity to hear her. So that's on the 6th of August, which is Thursday next week. It's at a date and time that she said was auspicious, which is great. But aside from that, if you go to the consciouscafe.org website, you'll see all the groups where we have our own meetings. I've got one in a couple of days up here in Skipton. And at this time, all those meetings are going to be on Zoom until we can resume meet in person. We've recorded, as we are with this meeting, we've recorded our meetings and they're all on ConsciousCafe's YouTube channel. So you'll be able to see the recording. As you're here on the event now, you'll see, be able to see it immediately. But we'll make it available in a week or so. So now I want to introduce today's event with Sylvana and enhancing your intelligent communication. And this subject came forward as an idea because what we've been through now with the pandemic, this heightened uncertainty and anxiety that I think most people have. Doesn't matter how well trained you are in mindfulness or whatever, it's really hard to rise above that. So even if you're really cool, we are surrounded by anxiety and uncertainty in other people, and that can cause people to react in different ways. People can become less flexible. And so it does call on us to really examine how we communicate with different people and understand how we're presenting ourselves and listening to people in different ways. So this is what Sylvana's going to speak to. And she's going to arrange the event so it's in much more of a dialogue way. So she's going to give a presentation, but you are free at any time to put forward questions on the chat or comments, and I'm going to monitor those. And I'll be putting those through to Sylvana. She also wants us to have a break halfway through because our session today, starting at 12, will finish at 1:30. But rather than sit here for 1.5 hours, we're going to, when Sylvana alerts us about 12:45, have a break to stretch our legs and have a glass of water or whatever. And now, finally, I just want to introduce Sylvana Caloni, who's a professional facilitator, leadership coach and consultant. And her background is global investment banking, global services and finance. She came to the UK from Australia, so she has a background of being Australian from Italian parents and has lived in the UK since 2002. And again, that's added to her understanding of communication of how different we are from different ethnicities and cultures. What Sylvana's clients have said she's particularly good at is making the invisible visible that we're not aware of, and enhancing self-knowledge so that you can show up in your best way and understand how your values, behaviors and attitudes are impacting others. And there's so much about nuancing communication that is a particular skill of hers. As I say, leadership is her skill. She has several leadership roles. She's been the founding chair of the UK chapter of Advance, a global network of Australian professionals, and former president of the Women in Banking and Finance. She's currently a board director of the UK chapter of the International Women's Forum. And she loves to support disadvantaged children and youth. She's a trustee of the Friends of the Rose Bowl, a charity that helps fund a youth club, and supports emerging leaders as a coach on the Uprising Youth Leadership Program. And you know, youths need support, but also older people need support too in our leadership. So I'm going to hand over to you, Isabel, to lead us through our session, and we're going to welcome you. You can't hear people, but we can wave our hands or clap our hands in welcome, as we would do if we were in a physical meeting. So welcome, Sylvana.
Thank you very much, Gina. That's lovely. It's always so interesting to hear yourself being spoken about. Now, so you've heard a little bit about me, and you've got a little bit of a sense of my multinational background and having been within financial services and now working more as a leadership consultant and coach. And I want to learn a little bit about you. In fact, we all want to learn a little bit about each other. So most of us, I guess, by now are relatively familiar with Zoom. Is that the case? Have most of us been on Zoom calls? Yeah. Great. And for those of you who maybe not be aware, you have an opportunity to use your hands, and we'll see. We're on two screens, but I would like you to spontaneously ask questions, or to, as Gina said, post them in the chat. And if you like, if you want to make yourself even more visible, at the bottom of the screen, you'll see that there's a reactions button, and you can press that button. It's either, if I do it as an example, it's either a clap or a thumbs up. So either of those will do as a way of helping us to actually see that you want to share something with us. So let's just start. Let's get a sense of who's here in the room. If we were in fact at a Conscious Cafe session, I've been to some of Judy's before, it's normally a reasonably intimate session, and sometimes I've been to world cafes where there are separate tables and there are questions and everybody's sitting at the table. So you would actually physically get to see who's in front of you. You'd get a sense of them because they're in front of you, and we have limbic resonance between us as humans and mammals. Because we're on Zoom, it adds another layer of disconnection, but we're going to try and connect ourselves today. So can you, in the chat, some of you had already started. I saw someone's from Cambodia, someone's from Weybridge, quite a few of you, I guess, are from London. Geraldine's down at Milford, I think you said, Geraldine. Where are people from? Let's get a sense of where you're from. Let's bring you into onto the table as if we were all here at a large dinner table. Can you enter it into the chat? So, that's right, Helsinki. French living in South London. Great. Herefordshire. And you'll have to excuse some of my pronunciations. Not being a native British person, sometimes I...
North Wales.
Spain, living in Oslo.
That's two.
Geordie girl living in Canterbury.
Helsinki's Finland. My job.
Edna's in London. So 12 of you have commented, and I see there are 22 participants. Are some of you able to, those of you that are not visible to us, I'm guessing maybe your bandwidth is not particularly strong, or maybe your, good. Thank you, Carol. It does help with the connection if you are able for us to see you. We accept that, you know, perhaps your bandwidth, if you're in a rural area, may not be great, but if you can be visible, that would be great.
Thank you, lovely. Yeah. And
then also, Liberty Radice. So we've got, I've got a compatriot there. And Judy's in North London. So another question for you. So what brought you here? What's your interests? What are you curious about? And again, if you can share that in the chat.
Coaching.
Coaching. Okay, so do we have some coaches in the room? Maybe if you could put your hand up.
Put your hand up if you're a coach, and then we can see if any hands come up. Okay.
So we've got one. We've got Sarah.
Yeah.
I was expecting a lot more coaches. Okay, great.
Maybe people are consultants, communicating better. Coaches are visible. Art psychotherapist. People working with words.
Fascinated in communication.
The core of everything, isn't it?
So just apropos, those of you who are here, so just to give you a sense of where I'm at, I really enjoy these sessions, and I also host one weekly for a group of which several of today's participants are members. We're from the International Women's Forum, so I really enjoy them. Today, I do have a certain degree of apprehension because I know of two people here who are huge experts on communications with very senior titles and many, many years expertise. So I'm just noticing I'm perhaps a little tense, and that's fine, because hopefully if I'm a little tense, that means I'm a little alive. And if I'm a little alive, I'll connect with you a little bit more. So what other sorts of things? People want facilitation, yes. Maybe to learn a little bit more about facilitation, to be a better listener, starting new jobs. Great. Excellent. Okay, so we've got a range of interests or curiosities about why we're here today. What I'm intending to do is very much to provide you with the way I handle this type of situation and plant the seed for you of, in fact, Sausan had said before, maybe to get some ideas of facilitation. So as I go through things, think for yourself, okay, so what's she doing? Is that working for me? How am I feeling? Is that interesting? Oh no, that's closed me down a bit. Oh, I don't think that's such a great idea. Gosh, I've never thought about that. So what are the range of emotions or ranges of responses that you're having as we're going through this? And then also keep in the back of your head, how could I use this? You know, perhaps you're not a facilitator of these types of meetings, but I'm guessing these days lots of you might be working from home. Would that be the case? Can people put up their hand if they're working from home? Yeah, so notwithstanding our potentially coming out of lockdown, several of us are still working from home, or perhaps because you're dispersed in your groups are global, etc. Maybe you work remotely. So perhaps just get a sense of, okay, so if you were running that meeting, what might you do that I'm doing that could be helpful to you? And as I say, I can role model good behaviors, and I can also role model things you don't want to do. So just be conscious of that and what works for you. Okay, and the other thing is, as Gina said, I'd like to do this in a very interactive fashion so that I'm asking questions throughout. Now, the reason for that, so the coaches amongst you will be aware of this, and for others, my introduction to neuroscience or brain science was several years ago when I read an article by David Rock. And it was a seminal article about the neuroscience of leadership. And in that, he spoke about self-directed neuroplasticity. Fantastic term. Self-directed neuroplasticity, which means our brains, and I have my little sample, our brains are actually, plastic means malleable, changeable. So where people say, I am such and such, suggesting some sort of inflexibility, or it's in my DNA, that's how I'm structurally built, I am not that type of person. In fact, self-directed neuroplasticity suggests that you can learn, and if you learn, particularly if it's self-directed, so you're taking agency in that learning, you can in fact shift. There's also a branch of science called epigenetics, which is similarly building evidence to the idea that we are not all, we're not factory built with specifications that don't change. I guess just as we get our laptops that come with factory settings, we can alter our settings as well. So the other thing about self-directed neuroplasticity is that how do you feel about this? So you want to learn something new, you have no real idea about it, you'll probably go off and ask someone. Or you might, depending on if you're an introvert or an extrovert, how you get your information, how you make sense of your world. But if you go and ask someone and they tell you something, that's fine. Sure, you could follow those instructions. If on the contrary, they help you to have some sort of insight, you will own that much more than if you're told. So again, this idea of self-directed neuroplasticity, if I can help you via asking you some questions, getting you to pause, getting you maybe to have some conversations in some breakout groups, just sharing amongst us, those insights will stay with you much more than if I simply told you, go do A, B, C, and D. Does that sound plausible? Yeah? Okay. Great. Yes, hands are good. And sorry, Catherine, I noticed you made a comment there. Yes, and that's a great point. So if those, hopefully some of you are also watching the chat. It can require a bit of multitasking, which I'll speak to later. Multitasking is not such a great thing if we're trying to handle cognitively challenging tasks. But as Catherine has pointed out, different entrepreneurs have very different styles. In fact, we have different styles. I think what I like very much about this sort of group interaction is that we can build on the collective wisdom of the group and then the nuance or the specificity of you as an individual. So why I was asking before about where you're from, what you're interested in, I'm trying to see what are the threads, what connects all of you, and then what might be different. You know, how might your lens of the world or your worldview be different? Okay, so does anyone have any questions or any points that they'd like to make at this point? No? We're good to roll? Tremendous. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen now. And let's move that along. Okay, so great. Now, what I'm going to do, some of you who share the sessions with us on the International Women's Forum will be familiar with this term. So we're trying to create some safety here and a bit of certainty or direction for you. But what I'm trying to do is not have you feel that we're constricted by, we're going to be 5 minutes on this, 2 minutes on that, 3 seconds on that. We're going to go over and do this. Because we're going to be here together to see what works for you, what's important for you, what would you like a little bit more of, a little less of. So we're going to co-create to an extent within these guardrails that I've set. So just to give you an idea, I want to set some foundations for our conversation. Excuse me, I'll just take a little drink. So I want to set the foundations for our conversation. I want to go over 2 models. One is called SCARF by David Rock, and a modification on that is be safe and certain. I want to, as Gina had mentioned at the outset, the pandemic is having impacts on us that are different from regular uncertainty or the volatility, uncertainty, complexity and ambiguity that we've known for decades. This pandemic is having specific effects on how we're responding. Then at that point, potentially we'll have a break. Then I want to touch on trust and conversational intelligence. I'm a conversational intelligence facilitator, accredited with Judith E. Glazer's company. Sadly, Judith has passed away, but she was certainly a leading light in the industry over many, many decades. And then I want to draw from you what sort of insights, learnings, or next steps there are for you. Okay, so firstly, just to shape our conversations, and here I'd suggest, consider this as a little bit of a checklist for you. So whether you come to a group session like this, whether you're having a one-on-one conversation, whether it's face-to-face, whether it's a feedback session, whether you're at a big session, think about how you're turning up at that event. So my little icons here, I would like you to consider, and maybe rate yourself. You could rate yourself now, and then we can look at the end of the session. What we're doing here in this collective, and what I'm inviting you to do, is firstly, really listen. Listen deeply. Don't come here with the been there, done that, got the t-shirt, you know, I did this in my MBA, yeah, I've read lots about neuroscience, oh yes, you know, you had a presenter 4 weeks ago that did this sort of stuff. Come here with new hearing. Come here with, oh gosh, that's different from what I knew, or no, I disagree with that, or wow, let me add that to my lexicon. So come with open hearing. Come with a heart. You know, we're here to connect. If we have coherence in our hearts, we will connect better. We will mirror each other better. We will listen more effectively. We will create better trust. So coming with our heart means having compassion, and that compassion is for ourselves. Sometimes you might find you go, oh God, I should have known that. Oh, how could I have done that? Oh God, or gosh, what's she doing? How can she not, she's not competent. Gosh, they missed that. What I'm inviting you today is actively be aware. So if I'm not being compassionate here, let me just take a breath, sort of reset and think, okay, it's okay. She's human. She's made a few errors, but if you're not making errors, you're not really learning. Gosh, I've made a couple of errors, but likewise, if I don't make some errors, I'm not going to learn. Come here with conversation. So the whole session is around conversation. ConsciousCafe is about conversations. And I love the etymology of words. So going back to its roots. So if you think about conversation, con means together, versation or versare, and Liberty might pick this up, versare means to turn over. So together we can turn over. So if we're having conversations, we can turn things over, we can make changes. Similarly with the eye, come with new seeing, new sight. You may have seen these diagrams before. If you come to some of my sessions, you may have seen some of these icons before. But think about it today and think, oh, what's different for me today about how I'm seeing those things? And in fact, I have an academic background, and I remember one of the courses I did, my teacher said we need to read things 3 times. And I thought, I've got a master's. I can read on the first go. You know, I can zip through this really quickly, which basically was a tad arrogant on my behalf. And also didn't pay attention to the fact that every single time you reread, you're actually a different person. You've had different experiences in the interim. I suggest you try this as an experiment. Go back and reread something that you've previously annotated or underlined or underscored. See if you notice the same things this time, or see if you notice something different. I find if I go through things a couple of times, it's like, wow, clearly I read this, but how come I didn't pick up on that? Where was I at that time? What was I distracted about? Or what was I really focusing on that I missed that completely? Or what has happened in my life in the interim that's made me much more conscious of this now, so that I'm really noticing it. So again, I invite you, when you're reading something, or even when you're watching a program, think, what's different for me this time? What have I noticed differently? What am I more aware of? What do I know better this time round? What can I challenge better this time round? The little set of people, that's about networking. As Gina had mentioned, I've headed up a couple of networking groups, and it's together, as we said before. So together we make change. As leaders, we can't do things on our own. If you choose to run your company based on your competencies, your knowledge, your skills, you're constraining your company. You can't scale up. As a leader, you need to devolve responsibility. You need to call on the perspectives of your teams. So being in a network or being in a team, understanding that you're together with others and listening deeply to their perspectives, particularly if it's a diverse group, is really important. The question mark is for curiosity. So curiosity as we've been trying to say here, is come with that sense of, yeah, gosh, yeah, that's starting to gel. Or, wow, if I have that way of engaging with my world, rather than this is a way it should be, I have to be perfect, I can't get it wrong, it's binary. You have a very different way of engaging, a very different way of listening, a very different way of seeing opportunities and being aware of things. The magician or jester there is designed to be, come to this with some fun. You know, if you think about it, kids, when they're little, aren't inhibited with the, oh, you know, I come in my suit, I have to have gravitas, I'm the leader here, or I'm the section head, or you know, I'm running this program. They fall off their bike, they get back on it, they giggle, they laugh. If we can retain a little bit of that wonder, a little bit of that sense of, wow, you know, gosh, you know, okay, I fell off, but hey, I'll get back on. And in fact, if any of you are familiar with Benjamin Zander, who is the conductor of the Philharmonic Orchestra, when he teaches people, he sort of says, if you fluff up, just say, how amazing or how fantastic, and try and shift your relationship to a mistake, an error, getting it wrong, failing. And the last of those diagrams, peace or centering. Now, let me stop sharing because I want to get a little bit of a reaction from you just to see what's going on, what has arisen for you as I've gone through those little icons. So if someone would like to put up their hand. Okay, Catherine. Let's.
I'll just unmute for a second. I always, I realized during the COVID time when people would say, oh, I'm going to go work out now, where we used to call that playing when we were little. So it is just the mindset of, well, if you're going to go for a walk, you're going out for play rather than working out. So we tend to make things work that don't need to be work. They can be fun and it's playtime. And if it's not the kind of workout you like to do, pick something else you do, because there's lots of options out there. So I think that mindset shift is what you're talking about now.
Yeah, and I think it's a really important point, because again, if you think about the neuroplasticity, right? So kids are voracious learners. They pick up things really quickly and they play. So how can we play? There's in fact an institute for play. So if you want to look up some more on this, we can find some resources for you. Anyone? Oh, there's someone in the chat. What's in the chat? Ah, artist and psychotherapist. Creative and spiritual expression, and not too many words. Okay, so perhaps I've been chatting too much. Anyone else want to share something at this juncture? Yeah. So
I think the element of play as well as adults is so underrated, and if we're not looking at it in terms of I got to get this right, you know, just making your mark, I think, and just allowing yourself the enjoyment of that is what interests me about life as well.
yes. And have any of you noticed some sort of contraction on the idea of play? Or some of you go, oh my God, no, you know, how could I possibly play? In my workplace, anybody reacting that way? Geraldine, what would you like to share?
I want to, it's about eyes, it's about seeing, it's about being joyous. And I think that what we have not done, or we're it's being afraid to look. I mean, I sat and watched during this period of time, I put out a little bird bath on my balcony. And my greatest joy came from watching a robin come and bath in this little orange bowl. That was joyful. And I shared that with friends and people. I sent the little pictures of it, etc. And I think that we're so intense that, and we want to be so interesting that we forget how to be kind of real and see and bring that part of ourselves to the table when we're thinking about communicating. Because it's all about storytelling at the end of the day.
Yes, yes. And different forms or different ways.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, fantastic. Great. Yes, Gina.
Early on in the pandemic, I was out in Asda and I saw this word sign in their home department of enjoy every moment, and I bought 6 of them. And they work. It's amazing. It's basic. As whatever's happening, I look up and on my mantelpiece it says enjoy every moment. And I say to myself, enjoy every moment. Just an instant reframe. It was a very good £6 spend for each one.
Yes. And good point too. So those visual cues are really helpful. You know, some people stick, you know, post-it notes on their mirrors, on their laptops, on their doors, etc. So little cues that you can remind yourself of some of these things. Great. Okay, so let me go back to my screen. And I hope you're okay with me toggling backwards and forwards, but I really would like to see you. I really want to build that connection with us. So next thing, and I'm going to close that. So next thing I would like to do is I would actually like us to do a centering practice. And I hope you're all okay with that. If it's possible, you might want to close your eyes, because all the visual connections and things that we're seeing take up our brain's energy. So if you can close your eyes, and I'm just going to read a small couple of paragraphs and just follow the directions as I'm reading them. So firstly, this is a centered practice. So find your feet. Feel your feet touching the floor. Notice the pressure and the contact between your feet and the floor. Feel the insides of your feet. Feel the muscles and bones. Let the sensations grow in strength and spread throughout your body. While maintaining this quality of sensation, let a new breath emerge. Find your hands. Feel what you're presently holding or touching. Notice the pressure and the contact between it and your hands. Feel the inside of your hands. Feel the muscles and bones. Let the sensations grow in strength and spread throughout your body. While maintaining this quality of sensation, let a new breath emerge. Find your head. Look. So now you can open your eyes. Look and listen to what is going around you and within you. Tune into your senses of smell and taste. Notice how your head balances on the top of your spine. Let the sensations grow in strength and spread throughout your body. While maintaining this quality of sensation, let a new breath emerge. Find your breath. Inhale and exhale on purpose. Focus your attention on the middle of your torso. Relax and let your breath move to its own rhythm. Let the sensations grow in strength and spread throughout your body. So those couples of passages were from Stuart Heller and David Shepard Surrender. They have a really helpful practical book called Retooling on the Run. I'd highly recommend it. Before I come back to see you, that photo, I took that photo. You may not see behind the rock, I formulated Y with some driftwood just on the sand. And you may see that what looks like a marble egg, that's a stone that was just sitting there like that as I walked along the beach. Who would have noticed unless I was engaged with my world, unless I was present? I could have walked by that and not seen it at all. But I took that photo, and I often use this in sessions with people. So I'm going to stop sharing again. So likewise, why do you think I did that? So some of you probably have some centering practices or some meditation practices, but why do you think I went through that physical scanning and physical getting into our bodies? What was that about, do you think? Yeah, Cora.
Yeah, I mean, to take your awareness more within to how you're really feeling, so you're more aware of your reactions.
Yep, absolutely. And Veronica, to be aware of our body. Yep, absolutely. And in fact, just building on that, for you to be fully present, you have to actually be in your body. You have to start becoming more aware of your body, more aware of your sensations. If you think that you're all about your head and rational thinking and logic and cognition, and that frankly your head carries your brain and your body is just some sort of vehicle or taxi, then you're not able to engage. Then you're not able to see bigger perspectives. Then you're not able to sense. So what we're trying to do is be fully present and be in our bodies. And that may be a bit of a strange thing for many of us. I mean, I know certainly when I came out of financial services and I was at various courses, I used to think, these people are pixies. He's at the end of the garden. What on earth are they talking about? Whereas over time, I've become much more conscious of my own body, conscious of, oh, I've got butterflies in my stomach. So what's going on for me? What do I need to pay attention to? Do I need to take a deep breath? What am I picking up from someone else? You know, as I scan the room, am I noticing people are getting flushed? Am I noticing when they speak, their breath is really high? So that physical awareness, again, is something that will help you to engage and will give you some cues or clues. Particularly, who was it before? Margaret asked about dealing with conflict and difficult situations. So if you're just in your head, as it were, and not using the intelligences of your body and your emotions, you're limiting your capabilities and your competence. Does that make sense to people? Is that a radical thought, or is that okay? Yeah. So we've got a couple of hands up. Does anybody think it's bunkum? No. Okay, great. Good. Okay. So now, let's just think about that. So why did I build those foundations? What's that all about? Has anybody got an idea on that one? Yes, Edna.
To begin with, to bring us all together into the same room and define, if you will, the background to how we're going to converse, listen, and coalesce, possibly. Establish sort of terms of reference, if you will.
Yeah.
That are common to all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a great point, and something we'll look at in the model is that we want to find those common elements. We want to find how is it we belong. We want to feel that we have a seat at the table. We want to feel that we have a voice, that we're safe in our space to make our voice heard. Great. Okay, and to Edna's point, so segueing on from that, I want to also suggest to you that our rules of engagement, as it were, and in fact, if I use that term, because we respond to words, you know, some people sort of say, oh, words are semantic, it doesn't really matter, but words are laden with meaning. Judith E. Glaser, who is one of my teachers, who I mentioned earlier, sadly has passed away, she used to say, words create worlds. So in this case, for some people, the idea of rules of engagement sounds way too, it's a diktat. You know, For others, on the contrary, and perhaps maybe for those of you in corporate settings, it's like, of course, absolutely, you know, definitely, you know. And in fact, for some, you would have said this was this is an agenda, and we need to set agendas, and we need to set you know, roles and specificities, job specs, all that type of thing. So just be aware. So how am I responding to the words? And also be aware of, you know, if you become more conscious of physical bodies and how people are responding, when you're with people from different nationalities. I'm currently working with someone in Switzerland, and that person is of one nationality within another. I'm just logically thinking, this is recorded, I better keep this particularly confidential. So let's just say she's of one nationality working with groups of another nationality, and she'll occasionally use a word such as, oh yes, so I need to be way more direct. And I think, actually people have said she's too direct. So what I need to do with her is to, as Judith Glaser would say, double click. So get a little bit beneath the, what do you mean by direct? How does direct look for you? And actually it means explicit. So at least in my understanding, my interpretation. So again, when you're speaking with people, just watch. Do they look a little bit discombobulated? Are they getting a little angry? Are they joyful? Are they, you know, they sort of moving in and engaged with you? So watch for cues from people.
The question here, Sylvana, Margaret's saying, what if you've scanned and are pretty aware that there is a complete breakdown in communication regardless? She said, normally I'd say stop pushing, let space arise. And in this situation, it's hard since we are in different countries already. So.
Sure. So I guess in those sorts of situations, perhaps, is this where you've got, so you said a breakdown in communication. So it sounds like you're in, shall we call it a rut, or you're in a habitual way of responding to that person. You two have set up a dynamic or a dance between each other. Would that be fair? Is Margaret there?
It would be, yeah. It's fair to say that we've been in this habitual dance, and I'm a coach, and I've done a lot of, as I'm sure you know, as a coach, one cannot coach one's own family. Okay, it's the most irritating thing in the world. So, and my brother is also married to a coach, which makes it even more complicated. So I've tried the just really perspective, you know, going into his shoes, taking on his perspective. I've done this mentally. I've attempted to do this in person. And I just am wondering if it gets to a point sometimes in a relationship, whether it's family or business or what have you, where one just has to accept that this just is. And the best form of communication is to send that person love and let it go. I was just curious about that with you, because I genuinely, I'm coming into this cafe with that inquiry.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's a great point. And in fact, sometimes the more we persist, the more people resist.
Yeah.
So sometimes the letting go, because it will shift your energy, right? So at the moment you're so determined. Well, I'm paraphrasing and interpreting, which may not be correct, but it sounds like you're very driven to try and shift this, and that will be coming through in your body. That will be coming through in how you speak, in how you listen. So perhaps if you were to shift, you know, your intention or what you're expecting from it. I notice you're smiling.
I've done that too, Sylvana. So I understand what you're saying, and I'm probably like your rock in that picture on that stone. I'm probably not seeing something that is center of place, and so I'm not. It is going to have to come from my body and not from my head. I'm not going to solve this from here, from the shoulder up. So I don't know. I suppose I'm coming to this call. I met you years ago, you know, and I guess I was just looking for some magic bullet. And I keep telling myself there is no magic bullet. You know, we're always on constant learning curves. But yeah, I just think it's particularly interesting and problematic, probably for people who are therapists as well, in family dynamics like this. When you know, you just have to throw out the toolbox and just, I don't know, accept.
And perhaps that is the case. Perhaps that would shift things between you. There's some great suggestions coming up in the chat box as well. Gina, will we be able to share the chat script with people later?
It's all recorded, so it comes through as and I can capture it and put it down with an email. So yes, people can grab all that. They can put it in there. Yes.
Great. Okay. And Salsan, I noticed you had your hand up. Would you like to share something?
I have a situation with some cousins. We love each other, but there is one topic we don't mention ever. And so, yes, we took maybe 20 years of toing and froing and face only, you know, kind of surface only. And now we've dug deeper and we just never mention this topic. We agree to disagree on it, end of. But we love each other. That will never change. It takes time. It depends on what is riding on your agreement on this topic that you disagree about. Who you know, whose life is affected if he agrees with you or not on it. That kind of questions.
Yes.
Sorry.
No, absolutely. No need to apologize. And Margaret, it may be a case also of engaging with someone separate from you, because as you say, we can neither coach ourselves nor coach our family because we're part of the system. We're not separate from it. So we don't have a clear perspective. And if you like, we potentially chat later as well. Okay. Is it Isa or Isa?
It's Isa.
Isa. Okay.
Isa, yeah. Yeah, just on the subject of brothers and families, you know, I've had a different voice in my family that has not really been listened to, so I've just had to go my own way. And now I've written a memoir, which is called Conversations with the Blank Canvas. Basically, it's about the family, but it's very difficult because my family are all around and we don't talk about it. So I have mentioned it, and I've noticed that my brother has bought a copy. I'm not sure whether there's healing or what, you know. I'm laid back and just see. It's very heated, but yes. I am emotionally distanced now, having had a lot of support with other what I call family or friends that I can talk about and can be acknowledged. And then, you know, the rest, I've had to have my voice, you know, and that's what I've had to do. Yeah.
Fantastic. So thank you for sharing that example. That's great. Okay. So I guess we're already, you're in fact modeling the rules of engagement that I was going to share with you. So, which is everyone has a voice. So you all have a voice. There's respect for different perspectives. So some of you may think that that conversation we've just had was a waste of time. You should do it this way, or there is another way. But we're going to respect the fact that we come with diverse perspectives, diverse backgrounds, diverse experiences. Hopefully this is a bit of fun. Hopefully you don't see it like, you know, it's a school lesson and I'm going to be judged at the end. We're asking questions interactively. The other thing too, and this may be something again for you to think about when you're in your work situations. If you're leading a group, do you take the view that it's your responsibility to make sure everything's fine and that everything works, that you come up with the solution? People are not quite sure. What I'm going to suggest to you and invite you to think maybe differently, any engagement is a co-responsibility. Yes, I'm presenting or I'm the facilitator here, so I'm performing to some extent and you're my customers, but frankly, I too am your customer. If we're going to have success in this session, it involves the backwards and forwards. So it's you asking questions, you engaging, you bringing up some questions, challenging. So it's a two-way street. It's a co-responsibility. And I think many times when particularly if we're leaders, can be the case that we think, no, I'm up front, I'm the one that's doing it all falls on me, it's all on my shoulders. But what we're trying to work to with this different way of thinking about communication and connection is that it's being together where we co-create when we're more aware of each other and more sensitive to what our moods, emotions, what's happening in our body. So we're utilizing all of our intelligences, not just our cognitive intelligence. Does that make some sense? Yep. Yeah. Thanks, Steve. I like the thumb. And Ali, thank you. I appreciate that. Okay. So I'm just conscious we have been sitting for quite a while. So can we take just a 3-minute break? So it's 12:54 on my laptop. If you can physically get up, maybe go get yourself some water, as Americans call it, a bio break perhaps. But if you can get up, move and come back by 12:57. So I similarly am going to move as well. Set up, but in boardrooms or whatever, you know, there's this sort of this thing going on where people are doing with their, so they're not present either. So you really do need to be fully present so that you can hear, that you can listen, you can be sensitive to what might be derailing me in terms of my emotions or my past practices. What am I stuck in? What you know, there's an expression, already heard listening. And I notice, you know, when I'm tense with some people, it's like I go into that conversation, question, task, whatever, and in my head it's like, oh yeah, I know she's going to say that yet again. She's going to get into the ridiculous. So I'm not there. I'm not listening. I'm responding to my own sense of this person. I'm not fully available to her and letting go of all my, you know, historical practices, if you like. What about you, Steve? Did you want to make any comments or? Oh, you don't. There, I think you're unmuted now.
Oh, yeah. How's that? Okay. Oh, I was interested. Oh, quite a few things. I'm interested in neuroplasticity.
Yeah.
That I found that is, especially in neuro, because it's a lot of things in our life. We have, I believe in patterns. Everything has patterns, and we have the ability to change patterns. And it's also with the neurons. We can create new things, especially like things like Alzheimer's and many things. But just more briefly, just about being more present, and I think the real core is the being intelligent with our communication, what we're and our motives, what we're trying to achieve from it.
Yes.
And that's what I feel there's a shift.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, I'll pause at that moment.
Right. Okay. Thanks, Steve. And a good point actually you make, re patterns. So the thing about patterns is, of course, we're trying to make sense of what's going on. We're first and foremost checking for safety, for security. So we're looking for patterns. The thing about being more sophisticated adults, if you like, is can we discern that, yes, okay, I've observed this pattern, it's similar to somewhere else, but what might be different this time? You know, how might I think about this with a different perspective, with a different lens? How might I ask the person, you know, actually put explicitly to them, oh gosh, you know, I've had this experience before, and this was how we dealt with this, or this was my frustration at the time, or gosh, I was fearful about this. What about you? What are you experiencing? A case in point on that, again, I was at a course. I'm a bit of a course junkie. And one of the women in the room, I believe she was Norwegian, and we were talking about conflict. And my historical response to conflict is, how do we suppress it, stuff it under the carpet, avoid it? And she went, conflict, oh, fantastic, she said. It's in that clash, that's where things are recreated, and that's where the creativity is. And I was like, wow, gosh, if I had that perspective, how differently would I engage with people? Would I go into conflict with okay, this is just revealing a different perspective, or a different view, or a different history, or a different baggage, or whatever? What if I go into it that way rather than, oh God, here we go, she's always a blockhead, or he just never listens, or I've told him so many times. Does that resonate? Yes, Gina.
Is there a different way, because what you're talking about is our skills and developing, being conscious of tools and using them. Is there a different skill set or tools required for dealing with family versus people we don't know, or we work with, or in a meeting with? Is a whole set of different skills needed for family who you can't leave? You can't say, I'm going to unfriend you. You can't leave that place of work. You can't decide that you'll replace them. We live with them in different ways. Is it a different skill set, or is it the same skill set? So I just wanted to ask that.
So let me say, honestly, I don't know. My guess or my suggestion would be that it's the same skills, but at maybe a deeper level. So, because we're so much more emotionally connected and attached to our families, there's different things riding on it. So we're probably even more embedded in it's got to be my way, or you did this to me when I was 5, or, dad's always preferred you to me, or whatever. So my sense, and as I say, I don't know this, but my sense is it takes more being conscious of your unconscious habits, your triggers, your emotional derailments. Okay. Great. Okay, so I'm going to do a whistle-stop tour because I'm conscious of time, and also to bear in mind, today is like a taster. I just want to introduce some things to you, and then I'll provide some resources. So at the end, if you would like the slides, if you would like some further resources, if you'd like to have a conversation with me on one-to-one, I'll provide my contact details, and I'm more than happy to continue the conversation at a one-to-one level. But if we go back to sharing my screen. So these models, so look at that sentence. If we miss a reward, we might miss lunch. If we miss a threat, we might be lunch. So that's from David Rock. And David Rock, I mentioned earlier, who introduced me to the notion of self-directed neuroplasticity and the importance of insights as opposed to being told something. He wrote a book, Your Brain at Work. He's written several books. He has an institute, a neuro leadership institute. So again, lots of resources. He originally came up with this model, which we refer to as SCARF. And then just recently, so Laurie Shook, another one of my teachers, she has a series at the moment called Neuroscience Made Simple, and she's adjusted it somewhat. So she calls it Be Safe and Certain. But if you look at the elements of them, they're both around some sense of belonging. So when I feel like I belong, I feel more likely that I will speak up, that I'll be listened to, that I'll be respected to, that my voice will be heard. If I feel like an outsider, I'm more tense. I'm protecting myself. My lateral vision narrows. I'm operating from a different part of my brain. I'll talk to that shortly. But that point of belonging is really important. And I know obviously at the minute with the Black Lives Matter, just the word belonging has some different connotations clearly for some people if we think back to slavery. So that word may be a trigger for some people. But what we're trying to say here is that, yes, I deserve this seat at the table. I'm listened to. I'm here. Both David Rock and Laurie talk about status or status, and the status is around, you know, sort of power relationships, and where do I fit into that power relationship, and how can I interact with people differently in terms of the power relationship. Or as Laurie would put it, how can you make your roles and responsibilities clear? The idea of autonomy fits with this notion of self-directed neuroplasticity. So autonomy is, you know, give somebody an opportunity to find a solution, come up with things differently, add their perspective. You know, there is that argument, as long as the task is completed, do you really need to know every single step of the way? Are you more interested in the outcome or the process in which it's done? And of course, that will depend on the business or industry you're in. But again, allow people some autonomy to present their own ideas and solutions. The idea again of fairness, you know, I'm trying on this screen to sort of watch a few of you, make sure the men don't feel excluded, which is different from the norm. Normally it's the women who are in the minority. So I'm trying to make sure different people feel like they belong, that they feel safe, that we can share voices, that it's fair, that I'm not, you know, privileging the group that I'm already, that I already know or that I belong to elsewhere. So think about how the decisions are made, how you communicate, where the decisions are made. In terms of expectations, again, clarify the expectations, set explicit expectations. Often where I find that people have discord or misunderstanding, reworks, make goods, it's because the expectations or standards that we haven't made explicit. We just assume, well, we're all in this office, or we're all in London, or we're all 21st century, or we're all women, or so we work from the idea of we're all common, which of course we do have commonality, but then there's differences. So, you know, my standard of what is a good report may be completely different from yours. If I have a very high standard of perfection as opposed to fit for purpose, if somebody gives me a paper and it's not perfect, then for me that doesn't fulfill the objective. Whereas if I have a view around fit for purpose, I'll have a different response. So how explicit are you about your expectations? Many of us simply assume. So that idea of being way more explicit in terms of what you would like, what would satisfy you, what you would consider complete, all of those things. Conversations are necessary. Don't just leave this in the head or in the, oh, well, we're the same company, we're the same age, we were born in the same country, etc. Have those explicit conversations. The other thing is around certainty. So again, when we're anxious, we start to close in. So how can you provide some form of certainty? Obviously very difficult in this situation of the pandemic, but what can you do which might provide some idea of certainty? So my guardrails at the outset, that was to say, look, you're safe within these limits. We're not going to go off into the stratosphere to discuss all manner of things. We're going to stay roughly within this. So that's designed to provide a little bit of certainty in an uncertain world. Or sometimes you send the agenda beforehand, or maybe you have a conversation before the meeting. So you sense the room, you get an idea of, where are the hot points so that you're not going to be hijacked in the middle of the meeting. So I'm going to go to the brain now. So the way the brain is organized is that we have several parts of the brain which form different functions, and then we have neural networks across the brain. And if you've heard that there used to be that idea of, oh yes, I'm right brain or I'm left brain. These days, that's a bit of an outdated idea. Absolutely, we have different neural networks, and some of us are more practiced at using some parts of our brain than the other, but we all have right and left brain, and the neural networks work across our brain. But for the purposes of our conversation today, what I'm really interested in is the prefrontal cortex. So this is at the front of our head, the front of our brain. It's sometimes called the executive function. This is where we make logical decisions, cognitive decisions, where we look at strategy, those sorts of things we do from this part of our brain. At the back of our brain, or towards here, we have what look like two almonds, and they're called the amygdala, and they mirror each other on the back of our brain. And when we're triggered by something, we have what's called an amygdala hijack. And an amygdala hijack means that we go into, some people go into fright, some people flight, some people fight. And there is some argument these days that another way to do it is to appease and please. And I think, Gina, I notice you're nodding. I think that's argued to be perhaps a more feminine way of responding. And I'm saying feminine, not female. So I'm making a distinction between characteristics that may be learned versus biological or DNA. So the importance, therefore, of understanding how can we operate with each other so that we're working from our prefrontal cortex rather than where we're triggered through our emotions with the amygdala hijack. Going to stop and share. So are many of you familiar with that idea of amygdala hijack? Is that something you're familiar with, you've heard before? Yeah. Have any of you experienced it? Are you conscious of when you just went either fright or, gosh, I'm going to get back at him or her or whatever? So again, just be aware, just build your level of awareness, because self-awareness is where you're going to learn how you respond, what's hidden to you. And I'd highly suggest you journal. And the reason I suggest you journal is it's a little bit like going on a diet. If you're on a diet, you're often likely to say, oh, gosh, you know, I'm not sure why I'm not losing weight. And, oh, well, I did have that biscuit at 10 o'clock. And, well, you know, I had that hot chocolate at midnight. But if you're journaling it, you've actually got the data, so you can see what you've been doing. So if you journal it, I tend to use little icons, you know, as we did before. The brain quite likes pictures. So I'll use a little icon of a light bulb if I've had some sort of insight. I'll use maybe a question mark if I'm curious about something, or a cross if I'm challenged or disagree. But start building a record of yourself. Start building familiarity with yourself, because we do many, many things habitually that it's behind our consciousness. So any questions or any comments that people want to make about that? Okay, great. All right. So the next on our whistle stop tour now, this is the important piece with regard to the pandemic. And I've got 2 links for you to actually watch videos with Dr. Pillay if you're interested. So why he talks about the differences in how we're responding in this pandemic versus general you know, uncertainty. So some of you may be familiar with this term VUCA, or this acronym VUCA. So it's volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, or some people call it chaos. I guess it's more complex in some areas. And it dates to, I think it's the 40s or 50s, used by the military in the US. But it just means, you know, so many things are happening these days. We're on 24/7. You know, we've got clients all over the place. We've got remote offices. You know, everything's happening in a complex, uncertain way. What's different about this pandemic is it's a discrete event. It's a discrete event that we are experiencing globally. So it's not just general uncertainty, it's a very discrete event. There's what's called mortality salience. So I could die, you could die. So this is not out there somewhere, you know, the unfortunate people in the tsunami over on the other side of the world, or, you know, someone in a coal mine in Chile or something. this could be me. It's salient to my existence, to my life. Plus, as a virus, it's predatory. It's coming at me. So he describes those three factors as creating that part of the brain that we were talking about earlier, the amygdala hijack. So we're hijacked by the part of the brain which heightens our anxiety, which means we revert to our habits. We revert to our own perspectives. All our biases are stronger, and it diminishes our brain's capacity for decision making and complexity, because we're not operating from the prefrontal cortex in all of this anxiety. We're operating from the more primitive parts of the brain. And it's therefore harder to coordinate with teams. And the reason this particularly interested me was I had some clients who were saying, you know, we're saying to our staff, tell us what you want us to do, give us some suggestions. And normally speaking, that's a great way to engage with your colleagues or your staff. Give them an opportunity to present their perspectives and their experience. But in this case, what Pillay argues is that's not the appropriate starting point in this environment because of this heightened tension. What he argues is necessary in this environment is that we need to calm ourselves through mindfulness or through some meditative practice or some deep breathing. But first of all, calm ourselves so we're not operating from the hijacked part of the brain. Then we need to bring people together on purpose and meaning, or something bigger than themselves, bigger than that specific task. If you think about it, when you look at a bigger issue, it's expansive, it's more appreciative, there's more opportunity. Whereas if you're focused on a specific task in this heightened stress, your vision narrows. And I invite you, when you're journaling, or next time you are in some sort of difficult situation, just be conscious. What is happening to my lateral vision? It's a physical thing. We do actually narrow our vision. And what he's arguing about there is, again, we need to engage in conversations at a much deeper listening level to counter our biases, to get those different perspectives, to provide more complex solutions to complex situations rather than simple black and white old ways of doing things. So it's when you engage in the conversations around the issue that you're facing. You know, my clients have fallen away, the specifications aren't right, payments aren't coming through, the government's not clear. When you go to those issues, first start with calming yourself, with bringing the people you're working with together over something larger, and then get into the conversations and deeper listening. Again, any insights, any thoughts? Gina, you.
Yes, there's a question from Sarah. Where does what Pillay suggests fit with a person's view or understanding that we're always in the right place?
Well, well, if I'm understanding your question correctly. So sorry, who's asking the question?
Sarah, you can see it that now is our life so that there is less fear. I'm not sure how that second part relates to the first part unless you read the whole thing again.
So if we have if spiritually we believe that we're always in the right place.
Yes.
We're always in the right place. Now is our life. Our life isn't even 2 minutes ago when you were talking about Pillay. It's this exact moment when the words come out of my mouth.
Yes. Yes.
If we believe that, what's happening in our brains?
I think if you genuinely believe that, if that's how you lived your life, I think you would not be as in such heightened anxiety, because I think you would take the view that, well, things will eventually right themselves. The system, you know, if you think of, I'm not sure if you've done any constellations or that sort of work, it's like it'll eventually right itself. It may be difficult, it may be painful, but it'll eventually come good. I doubt that terribly many of us are that spiritually sophisticated, let's say. I think the average person, and this is my view, I think the average person is much more about there's a right way to do it. You know, how dare you say that? I'm the leader. It's black, white. That's the way we did it before. That's the way we do things around here. So I don't think terribly many people are in that space, and I could be wrong.
Sylvana, could I add that maybe what Sarah's saying about the spiritual perspective is filtered through our humanity, and the lag time of then going back to our spiritual beliefs can be instant, or it could take a long time for us to have the insight of the reminder that I'm a spiritual being having a human experience, or completely forgetting that and then reacting as an anxious human.
Yeah.
Long time, isn't it?
Yeah.
Great. Thank you for clarifying, Gina, and providing a perspective. Yes, Catherine.
Hi, yeah. So I think one of the real things about the pandemic is an individual event, but it's triggering lots of other anxieties, you know, job security, family, travel, where people are. And so as a leader, when you're dealing with people, they've got that complexity in addition to what you're dealing with. So you may do all of this stuff from a corporate perspective or from a leader, but how can you actually be better at anticipating and protecting, well, not protecting everybody, but, you know, having those conversations at different levels with different people with different anxiety levels.
Yeah, and that's about the connection, right? So the leaders in this time, you need to develop your emotional intelligence. You need to develop the ability to sense, and that comes through practice. Well, some people are predisposed and very good at it. Some people are very good at sensing things all around it. Others of us have learnt to shut down on that sensing ability over time, and so we've got to relearn it. And it's partly by, you know, being present. So you're not, okay, I've got this next meeting to go, we didn't finish that, or we're, you know, so being fully present so you can actually connect with the person. And, you know, obviously on these sorts of video platforms, it's a little more difficult. Some of you are in the dark, I'm trying to see. Some of you don't have your screens on. So, you know, we've got an additional challenge. But again, first and foremost, try and be fully present so that you're not distracted or you're not operating from your amygdala. And yes, Edna, we'll come to you shortly. And then, you know, ask them, don't be afraid. If you say to them, you know, what is concerning you? And they say, oh, you know, I'm really worried because my grandfather's ill. And, you know, have the compassion to listen to them and to be with them. Because again, that will help them to then calm themselves a little and then engage in the workspace as well. Does that make some sense?
I think it does, but I think the reciprocal challenge then is about taking that, you could call it a viral load or that emotional load on yourself. And how do you said some people switch off, and there's a balance. How do you make sure that you're not taking all of people's anxieties on yourself?
Yeah, no, also a very good point. So again, I guess it's like discharging all of that negative energy, right? So how can you go out into nature? How can you how do you disconnect? How do you, so that you're not constantly on? Where do you find your energy? Where do you re-energize? Where do you get someone to support you? You know, again, because otherwise you've got cortisol running around, and the cortisol is what makes you operate from the area of the brain that is where we are distrusting and anxious, and we close in. So what you want to do is sort of flood your system with the neurochemicals that are positive, sort of the dopamine, the oxytocin. So, you know, be self-compassionate, have the bath, go for the walk, talk to someone that smiles. They all sound very simplistic, but if they're impacting that neurochemical balance in your body, it will help. And document it. See, give it a go, experiment, see if something changes for you.
Sylvana, we've got various comments, and Cora's asking a question. Can you clarify how you would bring people together on purpose and meaning? So clarification on that. Bringing people together on purpose and meaning.
Sure. So, and I notice Edna and Sylvana as well. So, and we're coming up to the end of our time. Yeah. So I guess on purpose and meaning, you know, are we creating this widget? Well, I won't use my brain, I'll use another object. Are we creating this widget, or what is this widget about? You know, what is it that by creating this widget we're doing? We're creating, you know, we're creating an income, we're having an impact on society, we're creating employment, we're what is it that you believe is the purpose of your initiative, your business, your whatever the thing is, and what are the values that are associated with that. So if you can get to those bigger sorts of issues rather than focusing specifically on, we need X grams of wood for this and the energy consumption and so on and so forth. So does that make some sense? Yeah, Cora? Great. Okay. And then Edna, and then Salsan, and then we may need to draw it to a close. Perhaps we should have a part 2 so I can do my conversational intelligence as per Judith E. Glaser. The insights I learned.
I have 2 comments on the question of how do you listen to everybody and sort of try and get them to the place of purpose and meaning. I think the main thing is to remember that you too, as the leader, is a human being with a family possibly and so on, and therefore, and express that. And one of the things we always recommend to others, to clients, we used to, I don't do this anymore, on a crisis, let's say the leakage of chemicals into the river or whatever, as it happens so many times, not to start talking about facts and figures about what it does to the water or not, but also say, actually, I really see what it's about, you are about, because my family and I live here, and by that saying, or by indicating that, you bring humanity to a role that is mostly devoid of humanity, and so that's one comment. So remember that you are a person too. And the second thing is that in order not to take on all the trouble of everybody, if anybody has done this several times and done it well, by now you know that there are probably several other people in the very group you're talking to who have maybe the same problem. And you can always refer to somebody else and say, perhaps the 2 of you could get together and figure out something, so that it's nice, because you create a community of a shared interest, and you don't have to carry the burden on yourself. So that was, that's just a comment to whoever asked the question. The other thing I would say, and that's very personal to me, one of the things that in this pandemic that made it so much more difficult is that there's no place to escape to. Normally you say to yourself, well, I can always travel to somewhere else and get away from this. But it was everywhere. It was pervasive. It sort of took over all of our lives, and there was no exit. And so the despair in Sartre play No Exit was very palpable. That's sort of from a personal point of view. I don't know where it fits into the models and the alphabet, but it felt like there was no option. You have absolutely no control, and it's just happening to you, and you have to sort of say, shrug and hope for the best, which is not how we're trained to be.
No, absolutely. Yes. Thank you for sharing your insights, Edna. And Salsan, did you want to say something briefly?
I've put something in the chat, but very, very quickly to Catherine's point. A client of mine brought in a psychologist to help her team so that she wasn't taking everything on herself. She protected her mood, if you like, for the ability to be strategic and lead the company to, through whatever they were going through. And she gained a lot of respect from her team by the fact that she said, we're all sharing this. Here is a psychologist that I'm chatting to. She's available for all of you, call her. And she made sure that each one of her team members actually had at least an hour with the psychologist, and more if they needed it. So she protected herself that way.
Yeah, that's a good point. Again, as leaders, sometimes we think we have to do it all, know it all, achieve it all, find all the solutions, but sometimes we need to rely on others, or we need to set demarcation around what we're going to do and bring someone else in. Plus, it's a new perspective as well. Someone who's disassociated from what the crisis is, or the emotional turmoil, who can perhaps give a fresher perspective. Now, I'm conscious we're at the end of our time. There was some other material I wanted to go through, but, you know, as I mentioned at the outset, I was wanting to dance with you to see what was important to you and to respond to what questions and things that you wanted to explore. So there is more to do. There is more that we can do perhaps at another time. But for today, could you, just for my benefit and also for the others, as we're exiting, could you maybe just put one insight that you had from today's session?
Yeah, we'll capture it all in the chat. People can put a comment or anything. That would be great to do that. And then your email, we can send that to everybody, your web links, a follow-up, so that everybody's got that and they can follow up on the resources that you said. Just wanted to add, when Edna spoke about there's no escape, nowhere to go, which is highly unusual. The other highly unusual opposite of that is that we're all in this together. We've never seen that anywhere. Everywhere you go to a supermarket, T-shirts, we're all in this together. We've never been in anything that's so global. So that's the other side of that. There's no escape, but we're all in this together. So that's a unique time, and it speaks again to our unique response to this, what brings us together and what separates us. So Sylvana, I'd like to thank you on behalf of everybody, Judy and myself at ConsciousCafe and everybody who took part today, and thank everybody for attending a really interesting session. And you just joked about part 2, but there is so much there. And I think we all take away different things, we have different perspectives, but there's some great tools there. And I also have to say, I love the way you deconstructed how you presented that this is what you're doing, because I'm sure even if we're not professional facilitators, we do have to facilitate conversations in family and friends, and to have those, to be made more aware of unconscious competencies and conscious competencies was great. So thank you so much. We can give a wave and an applaud. Sylvana, thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you for participating. As I mentioned, it was a collective. So thank you for sharing your wisdom and your questions and your observations, and for playing together. So thank you very much. And
it's lovely to get those comments there, and the dialogue continues. And yes, and from ConsciousCafe, as I say, we have regional ones. I'm doing one on Thursday on World Friendship Day. I know Cora will be doing one soon in Canterbury, and we have August the 6th next week with the astrologer. But look on the website and see what we have going. And thank you, everybody. I'm going to end the recording now.
Good afternoon, everyone. Have a good afternoon.